as most small business owners, you've got so many hats to wear. So you're involved in the production side of things. You're the director of the business. You're doing all the finance stuff. You're the HR manager. All those things fall on you, and it's a lot to deal with. My name is Mel Carrol, and I'm a designer, an illustrator, and director of Usfolk Illustration Agency.
So I want to jump back to the beginning of your story. A lot of these interviews are going to be targeted at people that are just starting out or in the middle of their journey. And we just love hearing where people have started and what was their inspirations and, kind of chronologically going through your story of how you got to where you are now.
Sure.
So going back to the beginning of did you go to uni and how did you know that you wanted to enter the creative industry?
I kind of was always into art and design even as a kid. It was the only thing I ever really wanted to do. I had no real idea of what graphic design and illustration was. Kind of when I left school, I think careers advisors were notoriously about 10 years out of date. So kind of blindly went towards studying art and design. So the first thing I did was I did the foundation course in the Art and Design College in Belfast. Growing up, I loved painting. That was my kind of passion. I was almost a photorealistic artist. I love detail. I love just getting swallowed up in that world. And then when I went to university, it was kind of not what I expected. I kind of expected it to be a very liberal, free space. I think I was coming out at the time and struggling with my sexuality. And I kind of thought art college would be that amazing space. But in the late 90s in Belfast, it really wasn't. It wasn't much different. I was still experiencing homophobia. The actual course itself, because it was very much open to different disciplines, it kind of threw me off balance because I loved painting and drawing. All of a sudden we were making sculptures out of twigs and bits of plastic, and I was like, this is not for me. So I kind of fell down a path of not going into college, really didn't like the course, ended up failing the last part of the course and had to repeat over the summer. I quickly realised that I didn't want to stay in Belfast. My sole aim was just to get out of Belfast and Northern Ireland and study elsewhere. So I applied for a graphic design course in Swansea. I had to send over this giant, the giant big folders you had.
Oh,
it was so heavy. So I don't know how much this cost to post. So I posted it over, and then I got a call from the lecturer saying that we think you should do illustration. It seems more suited to what you want to do, and more suited to the type of work that you've done. And again, at that time, I didn't really know what illustration was. I loved the idea of a course where I could just draw all day. So I went my merry way and studied illustration. And had a great time. Quickly came to the realization towards the end of the course that I wasn't going to get a full-time job in illustration. So that was a bit of a wake-up call for me.
What's
that? I think it was just, even now for illustrators starting out, there are no full-time jobs. It's really a freelance job. The only sort of jobs you can get are maybe background artists for animation and storyboard artists and things like that. So yeah, I kind of did a little bit of graphic design through my course, and I quickly realized that was going to be the career that I should pursue, at least initially. So I finished my course and applied for just loads of graphic design jobs.
It's very interesting you saying that you wanted to leave Belfast and you went to Swansea. Like, how did you feel? Because you said you were coming out at that time. How did you feel being in Swansea? And did you feel like you could be yourself more? And what was your idea of art college when you moved there? Was it different from when you were in Belfast?
Yeah, it still wasn't a great art school as such. It was almost more. It felt more of like a corporate university environment. Corporate's not the right word, but it certainly didn't feel like that art and design college that I imagined in my head. In terms of coming out and my sexuality, I was very lucky that I had an old school friend who had moved to Swansea the year before, and so she found me a place in her house to live. And she also told everyone that I was queer before I got there. So I didn't have to come out to the initial people that I met. Yeah. And it was just so great because, like, I mean, it's kind of a rare story, but I mean, you always have to come out. You don't just come out once. If you meet new people or you're in different circumstances or you make new friends, you have to come out again. But to have that kind of foundation was great.
And when you say come out, like, what does that mean to people who wouldn't necessarily understand what you're saying?
I think I probably spent most of my childhood and early teenage years trying to suppress my sexuality. So I was kind of passing as a straight person, and that was to shield myself from abuse or. But I think, so you really do have to make a conscious effort to, first of all, admit it to yourself, and then to tell the people that you care about, your friends and your family eventually, and that kind of stuff. But it's still a very hard thing for people to do.
Absolutely. And I think it's very interesting that process kind of, it's like you have to really fight for who you are and really know who you are.
Yeah.
And to explain who you are probably consistently, maybe.
Yeah, it's quite strange. The more you do it, the easier it gets. I think also when I was much younger, like I knew from a very early age that I was gay. I was about 4 or 5, I think. And I think I used art as an escapism. It allowed me to kind of disappear into my own world and also to create work that I sort of enjoyed the validation I got from that. And instead of being the queer kid, I was, he's really good at drawing. So it kind of give me that sort of skill. So in some ways, I think my creativity came from my queerness, which I think is pretty cool.
I love that. That's a beautiful line. I love that.
Yeah, I think it's only something you realize looking back. At the time, you've no idea really. But
yeah. So whenever you were in Swansea, did you stay there, or because you said that you got a job, you were interviewing for different graphic design jobs?
My whole university history is pretty messy. I did the first 2 years of the illustration course, and then I had a mental breakdown. I lost my mum when I was late teenager, when I was doing my A-levels, and I don't think I properly dealt with it. So when I went to university, especially when I was in Swansea, you're kind of very isolated and you're on your own, and you have to look after yourself, which I didn't do very well. Like most people, I drank a lot, and just through that exploring yourself and making new friends and stuff, you can kind of go down the wrong path. So I actually had a manic episode, which resulted then that I had to go into hospital, and then I had to be taken out of university, and then I returned then a year later. So I had to repeat my second year and my third year, which in hindsight was one of the best things that happened to me, because when I was first in university, I didn't really appreciate it. I wasn't really interested in the learning aspect of it. It was the partying and the fun. But when I went back to university, I felt really lucky to be able to do it. Financially, it wasn't something that was easy for me to do. But I really appreciated every minute of it. And I took the course so seriously, hung out with all the people that were doing really well. And it kind of felt like we were in this little illustration club together. And I just really enjoyed the illustration and also the university experience finally in those last 2 years. So it kind of took me 6 years on and off to get my degree. So
That's a huge journey.
so it was a lot.
And that's interesting that, like, I'm very sorry to hear that your mum had passed at such a young age, because that's so hard to balance. Of like, that age anyway is horrible. You're finding yourself, you're so awkward. You're also dealing with grief. You're also dealing with like your sexuality. You're also dealing with being in a new place. And then to have that year of just kind of healing, I guess, and kind of resetting your mindset around what you want. Whenever you first got your job, what was it and how did you feel then?
So the first job was in Belfast. I came home. I met my partner, Jeff, in the year that I took out from after my breakdown in the second year of university. So that's when I met him. And we did a long distance relationship when I moved back to Wales for 2 years. And then I went back to live with him when I graduated. And we still live together. So yeah, my first job was a company called Level 7. They don't exist anymore. But they had this contract with InvestNI whereby small businesses could get a free logo or a free 1-page or 3-page website. So what I did all day was design logos, a lot of logos. I think I had to design 4 a day, which is like pretty impressive when I think about it now. And they were pretty terrible logos, but it actually really, because I ended up working in branding for years, it gave me a really good foundation. Whereas I think I produced hundreds of logos and really learnt the skills that I needed in terms of Illustrator, InDesign, Photoshop. So before I started that job, I had no idea of how to use any of that software really, and especially not Illustrator, which is the one I needed. So I remember my lecturer from uni posted me a disc so I could like try this out and kind of learn the kind of fundamentals. So yeah, it was pretty scary around that time. I kind of felt that I got the job. Like a lot of people kind of talk themselves into a job or big themselves up. I definitely didn't have the skills that I needed, but I was pretty sure that I was going to get to learn them. And I did, thankfully, quickly.
It feels like it's a very like kind of, I feel like a lot of creatives can relate to that, where like you're offered this opportunity and you're like, yeah, that's amazing, and then behind the scenes you're just like, fuck. And when back then, I don't know, YouTube probably didn't exist, or you didn't have the internet,
hence the CD and the post. It was like and it wasn't actually Illustrator, it was freehand. It was like a different version of Illustrator. But yeah, I think you have to kind of do that when you're starting out. I mean, we're lucky enough in the creative industries, and certainly in my business, it's the portfolio that matters. So the kind of the detail around that isn't as important. It's really what the creativity is demonstrated from the work that you've created in the past. So yeah.
So then how long were you in that job for, and then what does the next couple of years look like for you creatively?
Yeah, so within that 2 years, that business was kind of split into the people that were working on the Invest NI logo factory, as we used to call it. And then they had the design studio, which was the more senior people. And they worked on what you would expect a design company to work on, brochures, websites, branding projects. There's some illustration jobs as well. So because of my illustration background, then they used to borrow me to work on certain projects. And I kind of got the feeling that people, it was the first time I kind of felt that people were giving you that validation and kind of assuring you that you were talented, you were creative, and that you had potential. And that was really reassuring. Coming from even my university background into the professional sphere is like completely different. So I was able to kind of build up my portfolio a bit. So I had my illustration stuff, but then now I had some branding work, some professional illustration experience, and then I applied for my second job then, which was more of a mid-weight. I never really understand why designers get called mid-weight, and it's a bit strange, but yeah, so I went for that sort of mid-level job. I got the job, thankfully, and yeah, it was mostly a branding company, so not so much advertising, but really a mix of all different types of clients and projects. So it just gave me a lot more of an insight into the type of work that I wanted to do.
And do you think it was beneficial? Because I think a lot of people now maybe don't value uni as much. Yeah. You know, like it seems to be more experience and portfolio. Do you feel like by going to university it helped you or hindered you on your journey?
I think certainly the foundation course hindered me. I was actually accepted to go straight on to the visual communications course, but I chose the foundation course because I wasn't really sure what I was doing, which seemed like the logical step. But I wish somebody had told me that you're geared towards illustration and design. You don't need to be making things out of twigs. And so, yeah, that was kind of a real stumbling block for me. So it definitely didn't prepare me properly for my career. My degree course in illustration, again, didn't properly prepare me for my career. There was some business studies as part of the course, some professional practice, but not really enough realism there for what the industry was going to be like. And I still think that's a big problem, even now with illustration courses and degree courses in general, probably.
Yeah, because they're very focused on like tick box and exercises of getting you through the course, and you obviously learn the fundamentals, but in terms of like, they never seem to show you what it's like to be self-employed or, you know, what the industry actually feels like. So there's not that sense of like confidence that you're going into these spaces of like, yeah, I could probably do that. It's like you said, you're learning behind the scenes and you're like probably teaching yourself so much more than maybe what you learned in.
I mean, you have to kind of figure it all out yourself in the end.
And how did you feel being back home? You've got your second job in that midweight branding agency. Like, how are you feeling about yourself at that time, and what year do you, and what aspirations do you have for your life?
I was relieved that I had got a professional job, so that was great. It was great to have a steady income, but I still had that feeling in the back of my head that I wanted to pursue illustration. And it wasn't so much even illustration, it was drawing and painting. That was something that I loved to do. And if I don't do that, or go through big periods of time where I don't do that, I have a niggling thing telling me that you need to get back to that. That's what makes you happy. That's what you enjoy. So when I first started in the second job, I had just finished a children's book with a local publisher, and then I did my second children's book when I just started in that job also. so I had a bit of an awareness of what it's like to be juggling a lot of different types of work. Children's book is a massive undertaking. There are so many illustrations to do, and I was kind of working really late hours, and but I loved it, and it was great to be doing what I really wanted to do. And I did a few illustration projects through my design job, and a few outside, but it was mostly design and graphic design and branding. So.
And how long were you there for?
So I was there for, I think, 10 years. So I spent a long time there. And I kind of worked my way up from when I started as a junior designer to creative director. So within that time frame. So even though I wasn't doing what I wanted creatively, I was learning lots of different types of skills. I was on the board of directors as well, which used to terrify me, to be honest. It was kind of scary, because I really didn't think I knew why I was there. But over the years, I think I was on the board for about 3 or 4 years. You kind of learn all these different types of skills that you would never really learn when you're just working on design projects and things like that. So I think it was a really good foundation for me before I started a business as well.
So you're in this job for 10 years, you're rising through the ranks, you're figuring out the foundations of how the industry works, but also, understanding how business works, but still you feel this niggling thing inside that there's something else to pursue. Like if anything, you've kind of ticked the boxes of the professional train of you're starting here and then you've gone up here, but there's still something inside of you.
Yeah, for sure. Illustration was always I found my love for it through university and through those friendships with other illustrators. And it was always something that was a niggling doubt in my mind that, maybe you're doing the wrong thing here. I had this idea, I think probably about 4 years before I started my business, that I would love to put together an online directory of local illustrators. And hopefully this would be a platform where illustrators could find work from local design and advertising agencies. So I kind of always had these little sparks of business ideas every so often. You get excited about something, and that was one of those that kind of stuck in the back of my head, kind of thing.
So then when did you start your business, and were you feeling confident about yourself at that point?
I've always suffered from self-confidence issues. So I definitely didn't feel that. I didn't even have the fantasy of starting a business as such. I remember one of the other non-exec directors that was on that was at the meetings that I used to attend to in my old job. He said, one day you'll have your own business. And at the time I was thinking, it seemed impossible. It seemed like there were too many things that had to happen for that to materialize. So it didn't seem possible. When the business that I worked for, it was around the time of the recession, about 8 years ago, and the business went under. So I got a very small amount of redundancy. That was kind of enough that I thought maybe that would be enough to get me started. So yeah, I kind of spent a bit of time just thinking about exactly what I wanted to do. And I think I can't remember exactly how long I spent. There was a period of knowing that this was going to happen eventually. So it was almost like this was a possible backup plan for when that day might or might not come. So I was very regimented. I remember I used to every week spend just like 1 or 2 hours coming up with this idea. And at the start of it, I was still of the frame of mind that I was never going to do it. But I thought, if I just gradually do a little bit, I'll see where that goes. And by the end of that process, I had a really solid business plan that I felt was different than other creative businesses out there. So I felt that the illustration angle was definitely something unique and not really explored locally. So that was always kind of give me a little bit of confidence in that there was an idea there or something that could be explored that might be successful potentially.
Yeah. So it was interesting then, you being made redundant, and then you had almost like this crossroads. You either get another job or the situation is here for you to kind of pursue starting your own business.
I remember interviewing for a job in and around that time when, things were getting difficult with the business, and I didn't get the job. And I remember thinking, I really should have got that, and like, why did I not get that? And I don't know, sometimes it feels almost like fate is at play. I know that if I had done that job, I would have been as unhappy as I was in the job that I was currently about to leave. So in hindsight, I'm really relieved I didn't get that job, because my life would have been completely different.
That's so interesting. And so when you started your business, like from a financial standpoint, like how do you know how much you need to start with? And like, did you get loans or funding, or what did that look like?
Yeah, I remember because I didn't really know how to set up a business. At the time, I kind of thought, if worst came to the worst, I'm a freelance illustrator, and all I need to do is generate enough money to pay myself something to cover my bills. So that was kind of one safety net. In terms of funding, I remember contacting Invest NI, the Arts Council. I think I might have got about £1,000 from Invest NI. And then I had a couple of grand from the redundancy. So it felt like I had 2 months in the bag, sort of thing. And yeah, so the most important thing, or the biggest or the greatest thing that happened at that time, was finding our premises on Queen Street, which was almost like it made everything make sense, sort of thing, which was great. And yeah, the early days of the business were really spurred on by the connections that I made through this sort of illustration umbrella. So I contacted any of the illustrators that I knew locally that I could, and tried to make connections. I remember there was a Northern Ireland illustration meetup event that I thought, I must go to that. And it was there I met David McMillan, who was an illustrator who'd studied in Bristol, wasn't long graduated, and moved back home for a year and needed somewhere to work from. So I was like, work here for free. And he was really one of the people that really shaped how Usfolk came about as a business. The other person that I met was Paul Riding, another local illustrator originally from Scotland. He was kind of a part-time illustrator, part-time baker, I think, at the time. But he lived in London and worked for the Association of Illustrators, which is a really important illustration body that really help people out with professional practice and portfolio consultations, stuff like that. So he did portfolio consultations in London with illustrators. So that was like an amazing skill that I thought, I have to get on board with this. So Paul started working part-time then for Usfolk, and he helped me interview all the illustrators, create all the portfolios based on the meetings that we had with the illustrators, and sign people up and put all the sort of elements in place to kind of build and shape the agency. So
it's incredible. But that's down to you, like really emphasizing on your networking and your relation. You seem very relationship focused.
Yeah, I mean, when I worked in design, I worked for a design company that never ever worked with other companies. They were very sheltered. And I had this impression that all graphic design companies were very much in competition with each other, and that they didn't really want to get to know other designers and illustrators, and people would poach designers from one to the next. And so coming from an environment like that was very closed in and didn't really collaborate with other creatives, I wanted the opposite of that. And yeah, I just started gradually meeting all these really cool, amazing people that I knew were out there. But it was really the relationships that I built with those people that helped build Usfolk. People like Jackie Sheridan, again, worked with me at the start, and she was very, very vocal in terms of the types of projects we should aim to get, the types of illustrators we should attract, the type of image we should portray, and even the types of events and exhibitions that we would put on as a means of promotion. So, and it was just like we all couldn't quite believe that we had met each other and that it all was fitting together so well. So I registered the business in January, came up with the name, did all the branding myself, employed Paul at that point to help out part-time with the sort of setup of the agency. And then in April of that year, 4 months later, then we launched the agency with 20 local illustrators. So it's quite a lot of work. I can't imagine how we did that, but it was a really exciting, fun time. And the studio space that we had, it was so cheap. It was ridiculously cheap, but it was perfect for holding events. And we also had a shared studio space that the illustrator could use. So there was just a really nice vibe and an energy about the place. I never really, when I had the idea years and years ago about an online directory, that was almost that was the seed of the idea. But when we find the space, and particularly when we hosted events and exhibitions, and we got such a big following, because there was all these university illustration graduates, there were people, local illustrators that were actually really successful that work from home, had, very rarely met another illustrator. And we quickly created a community, and there was just such a great appetite for it, and it was just a lot of fun. Yeah.
And what is your business model, just for people that don't understand what Usfolk is?
Yeah, so the business is kind of split in two. So the thing we're most known for, and the bit that we would promote more, is the illustration agency. So we basically sign up professional illustrators, put their work on our website. So we have all the portfolios from all the illustrators. and then we promote them to primarily design, advertising and publishing companies. But really in the early days, it was to encourage local design and advertising agencies to use local illustrators in campaigns, etc. So that was the main goal. The other side of our business is that it's like this graphic design thing won't let me go. We still have a design studio, and we would do graphic design, branding and animation as well. So this kind of split in two, but they feed into each other. So we kind of say a lot of our branding projects are illustration led, and likewise with the animation and the design stuff that we do, that the best work that we do still has that illustrative influence. So yeah, those are the types of things that we try to work on the most.
Yeah. And at the time, was there anything else that existed like Usfolk, or were you guys kind of pioneering the illustration community in Belfast?
Yeah, so there aren't many illustration agencies in the world. Like, there's really not that many. There's not that many in the UK. There was none in Ireland at the time that we started. I think there's one in Dublin at the moment that they're not officially an illustration agency. But yeah, we were certainly the first Irish one, and yeah, it's very rare for an illustration agency to be in a small city. They're usually in London, New York, Paris. So yeah, but I didn't see that as was too big an obstacle. I kind of felt that it's the digital age. It doesn't really matter where you're based. Most of the illustrators are, based at home themselves anyway. So yeah.
And you're kind of, yeah, it's just interesting that you had this idea like 4 or 5 years prior to your business. And I love that you were just so persistent on pursuing your illustration, like really fighting for it, and then somehow making it into a business where you're also connecting with other people who are struggling with the same thing.
I think it's difficult when you have a passion or something that you love to do and something that you want to do as a career and can't quite get there, or and a lot of people, you do a job that you don't love as much just to keep going, and sometimes that job sucks all the energy from you. And there was definitely periods of maybe like 2-3 years where I didn't do any illustration work, and it just made me really unhappy. Like, even though I didn't notice it that much at the time, it was grinding me down, I think. So yeah, if I meet someone now, even an illustrator who maybe is pursuing a different path, I'll always try and encourage them to keep at it and keep creating work, even if it's just for yourself. Like, I still do self-promotional work for myself if I don't have any illustration jobs on, because I'm kind of like, this is what I want to do. And I think nowadays with social media, it's great because you can get that sort of instant gratification in a way from your peers. So there's a lot more of a sharing feel to it, and a desire to make that content. Back in the day, you're just drawing for yourself in a sketchbook, but nowadays you're posting it for your friends and for even your colleagues or your clients as well, and you don't really know where that idea or piece of artwork can lead, or the life that it has. So yeah, anyone that is sort of a lapsed artist or illustrator, I'll always encourage to keep at it, no matter, even if it's just in a small way, just keep creating.
So another thing that I want to touch on is like diversity. It's kind of like a trendy word at the minute, but do you feel like by being gay, has that ever held you back from any opportunities, or do you feel like you've ever been discriminated upon within your industry?
I haven't felt any professional discrimination, thankfully. I have a bit like what we were chatting about before. I remember coming out to my boss because it was quickly aware that he was he assumed that I was straight, and what you were asking before about what's it like to come out, it's if someone keeps talking to you about oh, have you got a girlfriend, or why have you not got a girlfriend, or probing questions about your personal life that you get tired of. Not necessarily, I don't know what to call it, you're not lying about your life, you're just not really you're not ready to divulge that to that person at that time, either because you don't trust them or you don't feel that it's any of their business. So I kind of made a conscious effort to tell my boss, and he was a Christian, so I kind of felt, it could be risky. He could treat me differently. But he didn't at all. He actually, once he got used to it, he just treated me the same as everyone else, thankfully. And that's been my experience for the most part. Usfolk in general is, I think we're a pretty forward-thinking bunch of people and always have been. We're kind of split. There's as many female illustrators as there are male illustrators. There's a whole bunch of queers. We love creating exhibitions and events around the sort of LGBTQI plus umbrella. So that is kind of our vibe. So every Pride, we'll try and put on an exhibition and do something different each year. Myself and Jamie Baird have worked with Outburst Queer Arts Festival and created a gay history project a few years back. And so we've kind of used the Usfolk platform to kind of speak our truths in a sense, and anyone that has something that they want to protest about or talk about or make artwork about, we're always really encouraging of that. And that's just the joy of working with different creatives, especially my experience with illustrators. They're generally really lovely, nice people, and they're really passionate about what's going on in the world, and I think that's really great.
Yeah, I think illustration's such a powerful medium. Really powerful medium.
Underestimated, probably. Yeah.
And in terms of what was your experience when the pandemic hit, and what was business like then?
The business then was, so we're internally a very small business of 2-3 people, but we have now we have around 30 illustrators, so they're all freelance. So it was really myself working as a designer, illustrator, and running the business. Jamie as a designer working 4 days a week, and Fiona as illustration agency manager working 3 days a week. So that was our setup during the pandemic. So we just moved into our new studio in December, and then in March we had to leave it. So we didn't even have pictures on the walls, and we were paying rent for somewhere that we couldn't use, which was quite depressing. And we love working together. We listen to music all day, and we go for pints after work. So all of that was gone. And I know my setup at home was a little better. I had a small studio space that I could work from with my partner. So it meant that I could kind of separate work and life a bit. But for Jamie and Fiona, they couldn't really do that. So Jamie had to move home and work from his parents' house. Fiona was living in a shared house. So she had to work in the kitchen with all her flatmates walking in and out. And yeah, I think like everyone at the start of the start of that first lockdown, there was a level of almost uneasy. It was excitement's the wrong word, but it was kind of this like thrill of the unknown, and you felt like you were living in a movie almost. But then after those first couple of months subsided, it got pretty samey and pretty stifling, and I think we all got lots of bad habits. And so yeah, it was very difficult for us in terms of productivity. We used to chat every morning, and we used to chat for like 2 hours on Zoom. So our productivity dropped massively because we were kind of missing that interaction. And we would probably talk or have meetings for the sake of meetings. Whereas when you're in your studio, you can ask a quick question and just get on with the job, sort of thing. So, and I think, like, I was certainly not putting any pressure on people to work your usual business hours. It was like, just do what you can. We're just trying to get through this as best we can. The biggest knock-on effect that we had was because we produce a lot of artwork and design work for events, and anything sort of events based, all of those jobs disappeared overnight. So we'd work with Belfast Book Festival, Culture Night, all those kinds of things. So those all disappeared. So it was a big chunk of work that we weren't getting. The one upside was that we started getting more requests for animation, and more digital content. So that was one change that was positive that kind of helped us through it. And we kind of figured that out along the way.
Yeah. And did you feel a lot of pressure, because obviously you're the person who started the business? Like, did you feel the pressure, like the weight of it, or were you in the mindset of just like, we'll just kind of navigate and see how this goes?
I kind of felt it was this collective thing where if I feel it doesn't really matter because I've got a really good excuse, and like we're all going down in this shit kind of thing. So I wasn't completely afraid. I think it was like everyone else in the world, other things became more important. And my father was ill at the time as well, so I was very much concerned about that and putting a lot of time into that. So work just for the first time really took a back seat, I think. And
you were more kind of focusing on the life that was in front of you.
Yeah, I think so, and not even so much. It wasn't so much in a positive way of focusing on my life. It was more trying to distract myself from what was going on in the world. And work is a great distraction, and thankfully, we were able to work throughout the pandemic. We didn't have to lay off any staff or do anything horrendous like that. So we were really lucky that way. I felt like the good ship Usfolk helped us sail through that a little bit. But yeah, it did make me question the importance of work. And work, running a business is really not always fun. There's a lot of stressful situations, things that you have to deal with, and they can't really get on top of you. And so I was trying to maybe not worry about them as much anymore, or trying not to. Don't think I did a great job at that, but
well, you're here. And I'm sure it's not easy as well when you're like you've got employees, like you have to. Yeah.
Yeah, and you do feel like a responsibility. And I don't really have a lot of employees at the moment. There's myself and there's Jamie, who's pretty much full-time animating now as opposed to designing, and then we have another one of our illustrators does some part-time promotion and admin, that type of stuff. So, so yeah, I do feel a sense of responsibility, but at the same time, I'm encouraged by the people around me and what they do, that they're going to be okay. And so I can't shoulder all of that myself.
I love that. So, like, what advice would you give to someone that's starting out in illustration? They've just either not decided to go to uni or they've graduated uni. What advice would you give to them pursuing that path?
Yeah, I think there's no rule book as such. One of our most prolific and awesome illustrators, Stephen Morris Graham, didn't study illustration. He studied something completely different. And then just decided to do this himself, you know, so he just picked it up, and like, he's worked with some amazing clients all over the world, all off his own back. So I don't think these days you need to follow a conventional route. Back in the day, it was felt that you had to go to university. It was the next step after your A levels or your exams or your college. That was the next step, and you had to achieve that in order to become a professional. And nowadays, when I see the amount of money that people are spending to do these courses and the debt that they're getting into, that they're hardly ever going to be able to get out of, there has to be another way. They're really not even learning necessarily what they need to know. I think there's the confines of university holds it back. I've no doubt that there are amazing illustration courses out there, and amazing teachers and people that can prepare you, but life is what prepares you really for creating your career. You know, when I said earlier, I really had to figure everything out by myself. That's the way it is for everyone. So yeah, I don't want to challenge people to kind of just skip the university thing, but wouldn't that be great if people just stopped going to university? I really felt like I spent so much time and money not really achieving very, very much, or not achieving anything I couldn't have achieved elsewhere. I love the whole idea of apprenticeships, and from back in the day where you learnt trades on the job, and I would love to go back to that. I think, you know, there is a level of that in terms of internships and things like that, and that's all great, but yeah, let's just skip the university thing and save yourself 20 grand. But I really feel that if you know what you want to do and you're really confident that you want to do at a young age, you can just start trying to pursue that. And there's no reason why you can't almost start your business so much younger these days with very little. You don't need any revenue or anything. You can just, if you're your own resource, or your skills and your creativity and your talent are the thing that will carry you through, or help you kind of build your career. So you've got all the tools already in yourself. And yeah, I just think the way information is so readily available now, there's no reason why people can't find out and figure that out. But I do think it's pretty scandalous, the amount of money students have to pay, and especially people from low income families. I was lucky back in the day to have a grant. Like, it wasn't very much, but it was a lot, you know, it was enough to keep me going, alongside a student loan. But the loans that people need to get now and the fees that they have to pay are just such a a crazy difference in the last 20 years. I think it's really unfair to expect young people to shoulder that burden on this false hope that you're going to end up with a career. And it's not just illustration or design. Like, there are a bunch of courses that directly lead you towards a career, and as soon as you get out, you do your internship and you work your way up, and that's great. Graphic design is one of those jobs. Animation is like that as well. Illustration definitely isn't. But there are so many other courses that have no gateway to careers, and I'm just like, why?
I have one question around like failure, in terms of, because obviously you've been in business for a long time, and I would imagine you've probably made mistakes. Do you have any, like, and I don't even like using the word failure, because I think you can kind of put a lot of fear into making mistakes, where actually when you make mistakes, that's whenever you probably make the most growth. So I'm trying to figure out what word to use. But what would you say your biggest failure has been within business?
Biggest failure?
That's a very heavy question.
Yeah, I think, and there haven't been any catastrophic failures, thankfully, that I can remember. But something that I have failed in the past is trying to do too many things myself, because it is quite scary, the financial side of your business. And the way our business works, we don't have projects booked in for months and months in advance. So I can't say this year's going to be a great year. I can say this next 2 months are going to be busy. So that's always something that you have to live with, is that uncertainty. So it's not like having a full-time job. You can be reassured by the fact that the more years I put behind me, it means that, well, it's worked, then hopefully it'll continue to work that way. So yeah, my biggest feeling is really not taking on help when I should have, and I really can't balance everything myself. I have literally, as most small business owners, you've got so many hats to wear. So you're involved in the production side of things. You're the director of the business. You're doing all the finance stuff. You're the HR manager. All those things fall on you, and it's a lot to deal with. So I have the fantasy of how many people I would like to work for Usfolk, but I just need to find how to get there. So it's about recognizing that you need help and having that faith that things will work out.
My last question is, what piece of advice would you give to your younger self?
Something that I regret not doing when I was younger is just following my passion rather than being led by, I need to get an adult job. So in hindsight, in that foundation course, I should have just done fine art portrait painting. Do you know what? That's what I really wanted to do, was just to paint. And I got sidetracked by life and carried along, and I was just too worried about not being able to pay bills. So yeah, just follow your passion for drawing and painting, and never stop that.